Nerd Morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Miller, and today on the Nerd Morning Show, we're giving tips and tricks for beginner comic book readers and also information I think that's going to be helpful for long-time readers. Stuff that maybe you're going to find useful to remember and to look into. So let's dive in on some of these things. So when I started reading comics, I kind of felt a little overwhelmed. And when I take people to comic book shops with me, or I'm talking to people that are starting to read, I hear it over and over again. I just feel so overwhelmed. This is just super daunting. I want to get into some of these things, but I just don't know where to get started. And when I go to shops, there's tons of things to look at and see, and I don't know where I should begin. So I think that's the first thing that I want to talk about is where do I start? Well, it's really pretty simple. Pick a character or two that you think would be fun to read. I really like Batman. I enjoyed Batman, first as a kid with the movies, with the cartoons, and I had a lot of fun with those types of things. And moving forward, that was a big motivator for me to say, when I start reading these comics, I'm going to start with Batman. So that's what I did. I started picking up Batman comics and just started reading them, and that was a really good starting point. Then I was able to expand to other characters that were associated with Batman, and then the whole DC universe, the Marvel universe, expanded out to independent books, and just found a lot of amazing stories and characters to explore and read inside of comics. But really, for me, it started with just one character, and then it expanded out. And I feel like that was a really good, organic, easy way to get started. So I recommend pick a character or two that you think would be fun to read and start from there. When you go and you decide, I want to go and read Batman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, whomever, then I recommend, if you have comic book shops that are local to your area, is to go and visit a couple of them. Find out which ones you feel really comfortable with, that you enjoy, and I really recommend with that as well is to talk to some of the people there. They are some of the best resources that you have, because you can go up to them and say, hey, I want to read some Batman comics. I've not really read a lot of comics before, and I want some recommendations about where to get started. They might say, oh, hey, this is great. Let's go find a couple of books that we think would connect really well with you and get you involved in that character. Super easy way to get started. I think when we go shopping, a lot of times we kind of have that superstore mentality. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to grab some stuff, I'm going to go to the checkout, and I'm done. And that works. That's totally fine. But a lot of the people who work at the comic book shops, who are involved in those circles, they're nerds. They like this stuff. They think that Batman's cool and that Superman is interesting, and they read this stuff and talk about this stuff with their friends. And so when you go up to them and say, I want to learn a little bit more about this character, they're going to be like, oh man, I just read this thing. It was super awesome. Here, let me show you some stuff about that character. And they're going to go in and they're going to give these really useful recommendations and be excited to talk to you about that, because that's something that they love. Obviously, you're going to find some books that you're going to enjoy reading, but also maybe build some connections into that world that will be kind of fun to have. I think when you are getting started, the best place to start is to pick up graphic novels and trade paperbacks. So those are these books that are kind of have a collection of issues that were put together, or are just one big book that was released like that. So the reason why I recommend this is because it's going to have, generally speaking, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's really easy to know where should I get started, because on this, like this one, it says Volume 1. On the spine of the book, it has the number 1. I can see this is a good starting point for a Batman story because it's telling me this is book 1. So I should be able to, with some cursory understanding of who the Batman character is, go in and have enough information to be able to go through that story and to have a good time. I think that this is a really, really easy and good way to get started in reading comic books, because you're able to get involved in the full story and you don't have to know everything about the character. I started out reading graphic novels. That's exactly what I did, and I started with a volume 1 and a volume 2 and a volume 3 and a volume 4, and then I was like, okay, I've caught up kind of on that character. Let's connect to some of the other characters around, and started to expand. Then I was able to jump into the single issues, and I felt really, really comfortable. So graphic novels, trade paperbacks, these are a really great resource to have a full, complete story, and it's a great, totally legitimate way to be reading your books. I think another thing that's really useful to understand and remember is that since comic books have been on for decades and decades, that there are occasionally reboots or designated eras for a comic. And these might be manifested in the whole universe as something like Marvel Now or DC's New 52 or the DC Rebirth. And with those things, you're able to find a jumping on point. Pretty much the publishers have said, we've gone on for a couple of years, we want to make sure that we can keep things fresh or make it easy for somebody who's new to comics to be able to jump in and enjoy these stories, so they kind of have these jumping on points. You can go, again, to your comic book shop and ask what they are, look them up, or just kind of look on the books themselves. Like this one here, again, it says it's the New 52, so I could read a couple of these Batman books and think, okay, I kind of want some more from this universe. I want to make sure it's also in the same era, so I can then go and find the New 52 for Wonder Woman, the New 52 for Nightwing, the New 52 for Batgirl, and I could find these different type of stories with these different characters, and they're going to have, maybe to a degree, some association inside of this expanded universe of these characters. I think that's a really useful thing. And you can go in and find all those things to get you kind of used to the whole universe feel that comic books have. And the reason why we have such expanded universes inside of the movies now is because there's an expanded universe in the comics, and they've been doing that forever. So I think that's something that's really fun to be able to start to do. Another thing that I think is particularly useful and helpful is to understand the ratings of comic books. There are different ratings like E for everyone, 14 or 14 plus for kind of teenage readings, and then there's also mature content out there. And so if you're picking up a book and you want to make sure that it's something that you're feeling comfortable with, or maybe you're going to give this to a kid, or read that together that way, you can pick up a certain content level for those and make sure that they're appropriate for the reading audience. And I have a whole video that talks about that, so I'll make sure to drop that in the descriptions in this video below. So that's a great resource to learn a little bit more about that. I think that it's okay to know that you don't have to know everything when you're going in and starting reading comics. There's so much history, there's so much background information that it's really impossible to know everything. I've read comics for years and years, and I still have tons more that I need to learn. If you were reading a couple of Batman comics and then you're saying, I really enjoy this, I'm kind of ready to get started on reading some of the regular issues, I say just get started. You can go to your comic book store and say, hey, I want to get started on Batman. How many issues are they in on that particular story arc? And they say, we've actually maybe the last 3 issues, and they'll say, there's this one, this one, this one, here you go. Then you've got maybe those 3 that you can catch up on, and then you're good to go to move forward. That's a really great way to do it. And you're maybe not going to know every single detail, but you are going to be able to get in and get going and then kind of catch up. And most of the details that you probably have missed are just kind of side small details, and you'll catch on as you just simply start reading. And that's really the only way to do it. When you're looking at comic books, like this one you see, it's issue 91. And comic book stories, they kind of go in cycles of maybe most commonly 5 or 6 issues for a story arc. And so you might go in and say, I want to start reading Batman, but it's on issue 91. Really, maybe you only needed to go back until maybe 86 and then get started. Or say, okay, when it gets started on issue 92, I can get started on a new one, or something like that. So you can find a way to jump in mid-number, because this has been going on for years. It's not possible necessarily to find every single issue all the way through, but you're going to be able to find a good, comfortable jumping on point and get started to read issues that way. And again, that's a really good thing that comic book shops are going to be able to help you figure out when you go and talk to them there. Not everyone has comic book shops close to them, or that's maybe not the most convenient way to have bookshelves and bookshelves of comic books filling your house? Well, there are some online resources that are really great, and I've used each of them to some degree. Marvel Unlimited, DC Universe, and Comixology are resources that are, generally speaking, either subscriptions or pay per book, just kind of like an digital store for comic books. And these are really great resources for online reading or for digital reading. So I have on my tablet a couple of these on there, and I use them and read from those when I'm on the road, when I'm trying to just spend some time before an appointment, things like that, where I have time to maybe open up and read a book, but I don't want to necessarily lug around all of the comic books that I have. That's a really, really easy way to get some of those books, and it's just super convenient. I really like them. Definitely recommend those. Another thing is that it's really okay to ask questions. You have a ton of history inside of the comic book world, and so they might reference something or talk about something, or you might have different questions about this or that, and I think that's really something that you should just feel okay about. I have been reading comic books for years and years, and I still don't know everything, but there are a lot of ways that you can find things out. You can talk to friends, you can talk to your comic book stores, and if you feel like it's a question that I might be able to help you with, you can always reach out to me. You can put those things out in kind of like the comments below on these videos. You can reach out to me on Instagram and on Twitter. You can find me at Nerd Morning on each of those platforms. So that's a really great resource as well for you guys. With that, I would invite you guys to be sure to subscribe and like my videos, and also follow me on other platforms as well. That way I'm able to help you and give you guys more content. The big and most important thing that I think should be the big takeaway and when you're starting to read comics is to just have fun with it. That they are, entertainment first and foremost. They can be, I think, particularly intellectual or thought-provoking or heartwarming, have all those types of things, but ultimately the big goal of a comic book is to be fun, to be good enjoyment. And I think that that's something just to kind of remember, that you can go in and you can just simply have fun with it, and that's just perfect. So I hope this helps you guys, gives you guys a couple of ideas or insights about where to get started when you're reading your comics, and some things that might help you in finding new things to learn or new places to go in your comic book reading journey. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for more of those videos.